The rumble of the dropship's engines rattled through Commander Alex Chen's bones as it descended through the thin Martian atmosphere. Through the viewport, the rusty landscape stretched endlessly, dotted with the gleaming domes of human colonies established over the past 30 years. This was humanity's frontier, their first true foothold beyond Earth. And now it was under attack. 60 seconds to touchdown, the pilot's voice crackled over the comms. Alex checked the seals on his combat suit one last time and nodded to the dozen Marines strapped in across from him. Their faces were grim but determined, just like his own. 3 days ago, the unthinkable had happened. Massive ships had appeared in orbit around Mars without warning. They weren't human vessels. The alien craft had strange, asymmetrical designs that defied conventional engineering logic, like twisted obsidian sculptures that somehow functioned as spaceships. The first communication from them had been brief and clear. Mars belonged to them now. Humans had 48 hours to evacuate or be eliminated. Earth's response was equally clear. Mars is ours. We stay. The fighting began almost immediately. The aliens, which survivors called the Voidborn for their apparent comfort in the vacuum of space, had technology beyond humanity's current capabilities. Their weapons fired strange pulses of energy that seemed to distort matter itself. Their armor absorbed conventional bullets like they were nothing more than raindrops, but what the aliens hadn't counted on was humanity's sheer stubborn refusal to give up what they had built. "Macy, what's the status at Olympus Colony?" Alex asked, checking his rifle's charge. Lieutenant Riley Macy swiped through her tablet. "Still holding, sir." The colonists barricaded themselves in the main habitat dome. The mining crews repurposed their excavation equipment into makeshift weapons. They've managed to take down 3 Voidborn assault parties. Alex smiled grimly. Civilians with mining tools holding their own against advanced alien warriors. That was humanity for you, scrappy, resourceful, and absolutely unwilling to roll over. The dropship lurched as it touched down on the red soil. Alex was the first one on his feet. "Remember," he shouted over the whine of the ramp lowering, "we're here to support the Newton research base. They've discovered something about the Voidborn weapons, something that might give us an edge. Our mission is to get their research team and data back to Phobos Station in one piece." The squad moved out into the Martian day, the sun dimmer here than on Earth but the sky clear enough to see 3 Voidborn ships hovering in the distance like menacing black thorns against the salmon-colored sky. The research base was only half a kilometer away, its reinforced domes still intact but showing battle damage along the western quadrant. As they approached at a careful run, using the natural rock formations for cover, Alex's comm unit chimed. "This is Dr. Anna Patel at Newton Base. Is that an Earth Force team approaching our position?" "Affirmative, Doctor." "Commander Alex Chen, 23rd Mars Expeditionary Force. We're here to extract you and your research." There was a pause before Dr. Patel responded, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Commander, you need to hurry. We've figured it out. The Voidborn aren't just attacking us for territory, they're after something specific. Something beneath the Martian surface that we accidentally uncovered during our deep core drilling last year." Alex frowned as he signaled the team to spread out and secure the base's perimeter. "What did you find down there, Doctor?" "It's some kind of energy source. Incredibly powerful. Ancient. And based on the data we've gathered from intercepted Voidborn communications, they believe it belongs to them. Or rather, to their ancestors." The implications hit Alex like a physical blow. This wasn't just an invasion, it was a reclamation. The Voidborn believed Mars was theirs by ancestral right. "But here's the thing, Commander," Dr. Patel continued, her voice dropping lower as if afraid of being overheard. "We've been studying the energy signatures. And we've found a way to—" Her transmission cut off abruptly as a shadow fell over Alex and his team. He looked up to see a Voidborn ship, much closer than the others, directly overhead. It was smaller than the main vessels but still imposing, a twisted dark shape against the sky that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Take cover!" Alex shouted, diving behind a rocky outcropping as the first energy pulse hit the ground nearby, warping the very rock into impossible shapes as if reality itself was being rewritten at the molecular level. The battle for Mars wasn't just beginning. It was escalating. And somewhere in that research base was humanity's best hope for fighting back against an enemy that claimed this world as their birthright. What Dr. Patel had discovered might change everything. If they could reach her in time. The void-borne energy pulses warped the Martian landscape around them, turning solid rock into twisted, impossible formations. Alex's squad scattered, using the natural terrain and the newly formed alien sculptures as cover. Rodriguez, Harper, suppressing fire. Jenkins, get that shoulder launcher ready. Alex barked into his comm. Private Jenkins hefted the experimental weapon they'd been issued just before deployment. The techs back on Phobos Station called it a phase disruptor, untested in actual combat but theoretically designed to interfere with the void-borne energy signatures. I don't have a clean shot yet, sir. Jenkins called back, ducking as another pulse sizzled overhead. Alex tapped his helmet comm again. Dr. Patel, we're pinned down outside. Is there another way into the base? Static hissed for several seconds before her voice returned. There's a maintenance airlock on the eastern side. It's partially buried by a recent landslide, but it should still be functional. Alex signaled to Sergeant Lee, who nodded and began moving 4 Marines toward the eastern perimeter. The void-borne ship adjusted its position, hovering lower, its obsidian surface rippling like liquid despite appearing solid. They're deploying ground forces, Lieutenant Macy warned, her tactical display showing movement from the ship's underside. Alex had seen void-borne warriors up close only once before, during the initial assault on Phobos Station. They moved with an unsettling fluidity, their forms vaguely humanoid but wrong somehow, too many joints, limbs that bent in unnatural directions. Their armor, if you could call it that, seemed to flow around them like living shadow. Jenkins, forget the clean shot. Give us some cover. Jenkins aimed the phase disruptor at the alien ship and fired. There was no dramatic explosion, no visible beam, just a subtle ripple in the air between the weapon and the target. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship's surface began to stutter and shift, as if struggling to maintain its form. It's working! Jenkins shouted. The ship lurched sideways, its controlled hover becoming erratic. The warriors ding from it, 3 of them, dropped the final few meters to the ground, their movements becoming less coordinated, more jerky. Now's our chance, Alex said. Macy, take half the squad and get to that airlock. I'll take the rest and keep the void-borne busy. Alex didn't wait for acknowledgement. He burst from cover, firing his rifle in controlled bursts at the nearest alien warrior. The bullets still seemed to pass through them without causing damage, but they got the aliens' attention. What followed was 15 minutes of the most chaotic combat Alex had ever experienced. The void-borne moved like nothing earthly, sometimes blurring with speed, other times appearing to phase partly out of reality itself. Conventional weapons barely slowed them, but Jenkins' phase disruptor, when fired at closer range directly at the warriors, caused them visible distress. They're not invulnerable, Alex realized as he watched one void-borne warrior stagger after taking a direct hit from the disruptor. They just operate on different physical principles than we do. While Alex's team kept the aliens engaged, Macy's group had reached the eastern airlock. Alex's helmet cam showed them clearing debris and working to open the manual override. We're through, Macy reported finally. Entering the facility now. Alex ordered a fighting retreat, his team backing toward the airlock while maintaining fire on the increasingly disoriented void-borne warriors. The alien ship overhead had partially recovered from the initial disruptor blast and was maneuvering into position for another attack. Everyone inside. Now. The team piled through the airlock, cycling it just as another energy pulse hit where they'd been standing moments before. Inside the research base, emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. Dr. Patel was waiting for them, a tall woman with dark hair streaked with premature gray, her eyes sharp behind protective goggles. This way, she said without preamble. The rest of my team is in the secure lab. We don't have much time. As they hurried through the corridors of Newton Base, Alex noted signs of earlier fighting, scorched walls, equipment thrown aside, a few dark stains he chose not to examine too closely. How many of your people survived? He asked quietly. 17 out of 23, Dr. Patel replied, her voice tight. The Voidborn hit us 3 days ago. They wanted our research, but they don't understand how human computer systems work. That bought us some time. The secure lab was a reinforced chamber at the heart of the facility. Inside, a team of scientists and technicians worked frantically at various stations. At the center of the room stood a cylindrical containment unit, inside which floated what looked like a shard of crystalline material that glowed with an inner blue-white light. Is that what they're after? Alex asked, nodding toward the crystal. Dr. Patel nodded. We found it 2 kilometers below the surface, embedded in a strange formation that doesn't match any known Martian geology. When we extracted it, that's when the Voidborn showed up. What is it? We think it's a key, replied Dr. Patel, her eyes never leaving the floating crystal. A key to something much larger buried deep beneath the Martian crust. According to what we've translated from intercepted Voidborn communications, they call it the Ancestor Engine. They believe their forebears left it here millions of years ago. A scientist called out from a nearby console, his voice urgent. Doctor, we've got movement. Multiple Voidborn signatures converging on the base from all directions. Alex checked his team's ammunition and the charge on Jenkins' phase disruptor. They had maybe one good fight left in them before they'd be overwhelmed. Whatever your plan is, Doctor, he said grimly, now would be a good time to share it. Dr. Patel pressed her palm against a scanner, unlocking a hidden compartment in the lab wall. She withdrew what looked like a modified mining drill with additional components grafted onto its frame. We've been experimenting with the crystal's energy signature, she explained, hefting the device. This prototype can amplify and direct that energy in a focused beam. In theory, it should disrupt the Voidborn's molecular cohesion more effectively than your phase disruptor. In theory? Alex raised an eyebrow. We haven't exactly had time for proper field testing, she replied with a tight smile. But the simulations were promising. A violent tremor shook the entire facility, dust raining down from the ceiling. The lights flickered. They're using something big on the outer dome, one of the technicians called out. Structural integrity at 62% and falling. Alex made a quick decision. We need to move. Can you transport that crystal safely? Dr. Patel nodded. The containment unit is portable. But where are we going? You said your dropship was hit. Not where, what? Alex tapped his tactical display. There's a Voidborn ship directly above us. If your weapon works as well as you hope, we might be able to capture it. Disbelief crossed the scientists' faces, but Dr. Patel's expression hardened into determination. It would be fitting to use their own technology against them. They worked quickly, preparing to move. The scientists packed essential data cores while 2 Marines helped secure the crystal containment unit to a hovering cargo sled. Jenkins checked the phase disruptor, which was down to its last 30% charge. Sir, even if we get to the ship, how do we fly something like that? Lieutenant Macy asked quietly as they prepared to move out. Alex nodded toward one of the scientists, a young man with nervous eyes who was packing equipment with practiced precision. Dr. Patel tells me Dr. Kapoor there has been studying the Voidborn control interfaces from the wreckage of a smaller craft that crashed near Olympus Colony. He thinks their ships respond to direct neural input. You mean they fly them with their minds? Jenkins asked incredulously. More or less, Dr. Kapoor replied, overhearing them. But I've developed an interface adapter that might allow a human to establish a similar connection. It's experimental and probably dangerous, but theoretically sound. Another impact rocked the facility, harder this time. Warning klaxons began to sound. Dome breach in Sectors 7 and 9, announced the base's AI. Emergency protocols initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. That's our cue, Alex said grimly. Form up. Marines on the perimeter, scientists and the crystal in the center. We move fast and we don't stop for anything. They left the secure lab, following Dr. Patel's directions toward a utility shaft that would take them to the roof of the facility where the Voidborn ship hovered. The corridors were filling with smoke and the emergency lights cast everything in a hellish red glow. The first Voidborn warriors met them at an intersection 3 levels up. Their forms seemed to shift and ripple as they moved, long limbs bending at impossible angles. Jenkins fired the phase disruptor, catching one directly in what passed for its chest. The alley. N's form destabilized, parts of it seeming to exist in multiple places at once before it collapsed into a puddle of shimmering darkness. The other warriors pressed forward. Alex and his Marines formed a protective ring around the scientists and the crystal, firing in coordinated bursts. Conventional weapons still had minimal effect, but concentrated fire seemed to slow the aliens down. Dr. Patel, now might be a good time to test that theory of yours, Alex called over his shoulder. She stepped forward with the modified mining drill, aiming it at the advancing aliens. The crystal in the containment unit pulsed brighter, and energy seemed to flow through transparent conduits into the drill mechanism. When she fired, a beam of concentrated blue-white light erupted from the device. The effect on the Voidborn was immediate and dramatic. Where the beam touched them, their forms didn't just destabilize, they unraveled, coming apart like smoke in a high wind. "It works!" Dr. Patel exclaimed, though the kickback from the device nearly knocked her over. "But the power coupling is overheating. We won't get many shots." They pressed forward, fighting their way up through the facility. The Voidborn seemed to realize the threat the weapon posed and change tactics, attacking from multiple directions at once, forcing Dr. Patel to conserve her limited shots. At a maintenance junction, they encountered a group of survivors, base personnel who had been hiding from the initial assault. Among them was a wounded security officer named Diaz who had valuable information. "The main Voidborn ships are positioning themselves over specific coordinates across Mars," she told them as they helped her along. "Ancient sites, mostly. Places where our deep scans showed anomalies." "The Ancestor engine," Dr. Patel said. "They're looking for more components." They reached the utility shaft that would take them to the roof. It was a tight fit with all of them plus the hovering sled carrying the crystal. They would need to ascend in groups. "First team up," Alex ordered. "Secure the exit point and report back." Sergeant Lee led the first group up the shaft. For 30 agonizing seconds, there was silence. Then his voice crackled over the comm, "Commander, you need to see this." When Alex emerged onto the roof of the facility minutes later, he understood Lee's cryptic message. The sky above Mars had changed. Where before there had been perhaps a dozen Voidborn ships, now there were hundreds, their twisted black forms blotting out the stars like an obsidian cloud. And at the center, a massive vessel was descending, dwarfing all the others. "Mother of God," someone whispered behind him. The defensive perimeter they'd established at the shaft exit was holding for now, but more Voidborn warriors were converging on their position from across the roof. The alien ship they'd planned to capture hovered 30 meters away, tantalizingly close yet separated by a gauntlet of enemies. Dr. Kapoor was staring at the ship, the neural interface device clutched in his trembling hands. "Even if we reach it, connecting to their systems will take time that we don't have." "Then we make time," Alex said, checking his weapon. He looked at Dr. Patel. "How many shots do you have left?" 3, maybe 4 if we push it past safety limits." Alex studied the approaching Voidborn, then looked at the massive ship descending through the atmosphere. Something about its movement, its position. They're not just looking for parts of this Ancestor engine, he realized suddenly. They're activating it. Right now. The crystal in the containment unit was pulsing more rapidly now, resonating with something. The ground beneath them began to tremble, not from weapons fire, but from deep below the Martian crust. "Whatever that thing does, it's starting up," Alex said. "And I'm guessing that's bad news for anyone living on this planet." Dr. Patel's face paled as she checked readings on her tablet. The energy readings, they're exponential. If the Ancestor engine fully activates, it could reshape the entire planet. Make it hospitable for them, and lethal for us. The Voidborn warriors were closing in from all sides now. Above them, the massive ship continued its ominous descent, strange energies crackling around its hull. The crystal pulsed in time with those energies, like a beacon responding to a call. Alex made his decision. New plan. Dr. Kapoor, how close do you need to be to that ship to attempt a neural connection? Ideally inside it, but within 10 meters might work if good enough. Dr. Patel, we'll need every last shot from that weapon of yours. Alex turned to his team. We're going to punch a hole straight through to that ship. No detours, no hesitation. He looked at each face in turn. The Marines, battered but determined. The scientists, frightened but resolute. The base survivors who had already lost so much but were still fighting. The Voidborn think this planet belongs to them because their ancestors left some machine here millions of years ago, Alex said, his voice rising. But we're here now. We've bled for this world, built our homes on it. Mars belongs to humanity, not to them. And we're going to prove it. The crystal's pulsing reached a fever pitch as the massive Voidborn ship aligned itself directly overhead. The ground shook more violently, and in the distance, something vast began to emerge from beneath the Martian surface. A structure of the same otherworldly material as the Voidborn ships, awakening after eons of dormancy. Time had run out. The final battle for Mars was about to begin. Alex led the charge across the roof of the research facility, the combined fire of his Marines creating a corridor through the Voidborn warriors. Dr. Patel followed close behind, her crystal-powered weapon cutting down any alien that got too close. The containment unit with the pulsing crystal hovered between them, pulled along by two scientists. They were halfway to the Voidborn ship when Alex's comm crackled to life. Commander Chen, do you copy? This is Admiral Khatri aboard the EDF Thermopylae. The transmission was filled with static but audible. Alex ducked behind a ventilation unit, momentarily sheltered from enemy fire. Admiral? How are you? The comms have been jammed for days. We punched through their interference with focused tight beam transmission. Listen carefully, we're in orbit with the Fifth Fleet. Reinforcements are inbound to your position. Hope surged through Alex like an electric current. Earth had sent help after all. Sir, the situation is critical. The Voidborn are activating some kind of ancient device beneath the surface. We know, Admiral Khatri cut in. We've been monitoring the energy spikes. But there's something you need to understand about what you're carrying. A sudden explosion rocked the facility as the Voidborn intensified their attack. Part of the roof collapsed inward, separating Alex from half his team. Through the smoke and debris, he could see Dr. Patel and the crystal on the other side of the gap. Get to the ship, he shouted to her. We'll find another way around. The Admiral's voice continued gently in his ear. That crystal isn't just a key, Chen. According to our scientists, it's a control node, possibly the master control for the entire Ancestor engine. Alex processed this as he fired at approaching Voidborn warriors. So we can use it to shut down whatever they're activating? Potentially. But there's more. The Admiral's voice grew grim. The Voidborn aren't the original creators of this technology. They're merely custodians. What do you mean? Alex asked, signaling his separated team to circle around the collapsed section. We've decoded more of their communications. The Ancestor engine wasn't built by the Voidborn's ancestors. It was built to contain them. The significance of this revelation hit Alex like a physical blow. Then who? We don't know. A much older species, apparently. But what matters is this. The engine isn't a terraforming device like we thought. It's a prison. A very, very old prison. And the Voidborn aren't trying to activate it, they're trying to shut it down. Across the gap, Dr. Patel had reached the edge of the Voidborn ship. Dr. Kapoor was with her, attaching his neural interface device to his temples, preparing to attempt connection with the alien vessel. Admiral, if what you're saying is true, Alex began, but was interrupted by a deafening rumble as the ground shook more violently than before. In the distance, the structure that had begun emerging from beneath the Martian surface was now clearly visible. A massive black spire stretching skyward, surrounded by crackling energy. The ancestral spire, whispered Jenkins beside him, awe in his voice. Alex tapped his comm again. Dr. Patel, hold position. Don't interface with the ship yet. But the comms had gone dead again. Through the smoke and chaos, Alex could see Dr. Kapoor already connecting to the Voidborn ship, his body rigid as the neural interface initiated. Dr. Patel stood beside him, the crystal containment unit at her feet, its blue-white light now pulsing in perfect synchrony with the energy surrounding the distant spire. "We need to reach them now," Alex ordered, leading his team along a maintenance catwalk that circled the collapsed section. Admiral Catri's transmission cut back in, heavily distorted. "The crystal beacon, they're coming. Who's coming?" Alex demanded, but received only static in response. They were 3/4 of the way to the ship when the sky above Mars changed again. The darkness between the stars seemed to ripple and fold, and then something else emerged. Not ships, not exactly, but vast shapes of light and geometry that human eyes struggled to comprehend. They moved with impossible grace, descending through the atmosphere without any apparent resistance. The void-born ships immediately broke formation, many attempting to flee. The massive vessel that had been descending toward the spire halted, then began to rise, as if attempting to escape back into space. "What the hell are those?" Sergeant Lee breathed beside him. Before Alex could respond, one of the light forms passed directly overhead. Where it moved, the void-born warriors simply ceased to exist, their shadowy forms dissolving like mist in sunlight. Alex's team finally reached the alien ship where Dr. Patel and Kapoor waited. The scientist was still connected to the vessel, his eyes rolled back, body trembling. "It's working," Dr. Patel said excitedly. "He's accessing their systems, but..." She frowned at her tablet. "Something's wrong. The ship's power signature is fluctuating wildly." Dr. Kapoor suddenly convulsed, his eyes snapping open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. They glowed with the same blue-white energy as the crystal. "You misunderstand," he said, his voice overlaid with harmonics that made Alex's teeth ache. "The prison was not for them. It was for us." The crystal in the containment unit flared blindingly bright. The unit itself began to crack, energy seeping through the fissures. "Get back!" Alex shouted, pulling Dr. Patel away from Kapoor and the failing containment unit. The scientist's body rose several inches off the ground, suspended by nothing visible. When he spoke again, it wasn't just his voice. It was like a chorus of voices, ancient and powerful. "We are the architects. We seeded this world with our technology eons ago, before your kind had even emerged from the oceans of Earth. The void-born are abominations, attempts to replicate our consciousness in physical form that went horribly wrong. We imprisoned them here, on this dead world, safely away from the rest of the galaxy." The containment unit shattered completely. The crystal rose into the air, spinning slowly, fragments of it breaking off and orbiting the central mass like a miniature solar system. But humans came. Humans dug. Humans woke what should have remained sleeping. Alex's mind raced to process this new information. "If you're so advanced, why didn't you just destroy the Voidborn?" Through Kapoor's glowing eyes, the entity seemed to regard Alex with something like curiosity. "Because even failed creations deserve existence. But they must be contained. They cannot be allowed to spread." In the distance, the spire had fully emerged, towering kilometers into the Martian sky. The light forms were converging on it, merging with its structure. "And now humanity stands in the balance," the architect continued through Kapoor. "You have fought bravely to defend a world you claimed as your own. But this world was never meant for you." Alex felt a chill run through him. After everything they'd sacrificed to hold Mars, were these architects now planning to take it from them too? "What happens now?" he asked, his hand tightening on his weapon, though he suspected it would be useless against these beings. The possessed scientist turned toward the spire, and for a moment, seemed to be listening to something beyond human hearing. "A choice," the architect finally said. "The first in countless millennia." The architect-possessed Dr. Kapoor hovered above the roof of the research facility, the fragments of the crystal orbiting around him like a personal constellation. The enormous spire in the distance pulsed with the same blue-white energy, creating ripples in the Martian atmosphere visible even to the naked eye. "What choice?" Alex demanded, keeping his team behind him. "What are you offering us?" "Three paths lie before humanity," the architect said through Kapoor. "First, you may leave Mars entirely. Return to Earth and never set foot on this world again. We will restore the prison, contain the Voidborn, and you will be safe from a distance. Alex's jaw tightened. Billions of credits, thousands of lives, decades of work, all to be abandoned. Second, the architect continued, remain on Mars, but under our guidance and restriction. You will be confined to your existing settlements. No further expansion. No deeper excavation. You will live in the shadow of our prison, always at risk should the Voidborn ever break free again. Neither option sounded acceptable. Humanity hadn't come this far just to retreat or be placed under alien restrictions. And the third option? Alex asked, already sus. Pecting he wouldn't like it either. The architect's voice took on a different tone, almost respectful. The third path is one we have never offered any species before. You may take responsibility for the prison, become its new wardens. We would transfer the control systems to your keeping and depart this world entirely. Murmurs spread among Alex's team and the gathered scientists. It seemed too good to be true. Why would you offer us that? Alex asked suspiciously. Because you have demonstrated something unexpected, the architect replied. When faced with superior technology and overwhelming odds, you did not surrender. You adapted. You fought. Not merely for survival, but for what you believe is yours by right of effort and sacrifice. Through Kapoor's glowing eyes, the entity seemed to study them. It has been millions of years since we created the prison. We are weary of this burden. Perhaps it is time for younger hands to take up the mantle. Admiral Katri's voice suddenly cut back in over the comm. Commander Chen, we're picking up massive energy fluctuations around your position. What's happening down there? Alex quickly explained the situation and the three options presented by the architects. There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. This decision is beyond my pay grade, Commander. But Earth is 4 light minutes away by transmission. We don't have time to consult with the Defense Council. With respect, sir, Alex said, watching as more light forms converged on the spire, I think this has to be our decision, the people who have lived and fought on Mars. We're the ones who'll have to live with the consequences. Another pause. Agreed. Make the call, Commander. The Fifth Fleet stands ready to support whatever you decide. Alex looked to Dr. Patel, then to his team, seeing determination in their eyes. The Voidborn ships were still retreating to the upper atmosphere, fleeing from the architect's manifestations. On the research facility roof, the remaining Voidborn warriors had stopped attacking, their alien forms huddled together as if in fear. If we take responsibility for the prison, Alex asked the architect, what exactly would that mean? What would we have to do? The Ancestor engine requires maintenance and protection. It draws power from Mars itself, geothermal energy you would call it. You would need to establish facilities at key nodes across the planet, monitor for escape attempts, and most importantly, never allow the Voidborn to access the control crystals again. Dr. Patel stepped forward. We already have settlements near several of the anomalous sites you're describing. Our geothermal power stations could be adapted to serve both purposes. And what about the Voidborn still here? Alex asked. Those not already contained in your prison? The architect turned toward the cowering warriors. They will be given a choice of their own, return willingly to the prison or be destroyed. Those in orbit will face the same decision. Alex took a deep breath, weighing the responsibility. This wasn't just about winning a battle anymore. It was about securing humanity's future on Mars for generations to come. We accept the third option, he said firmly. We'll take responsibility for the prison. Mars stays in human hands. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the orbiting crystal fragments surrounding Kapoor began to spin faster, coalescing back into a single form, but changed. The crystal was now a perfect sphere, its blue-white energy contained within a latticework of what looked like golden filaments. The control key is yours, the architect said. When your scientist's consciousness returns, he will understand how to use it. The neural connection has transferred the necessary knowledge. The sphere descended slowly into Alex's outstretched hands. It was surprisingly warm, humming with potent energy. The engine requires a human consciousness to interpret its functions, the architect continued. A single mind would be overwhelmed, but linked together, a network of human operators, you may succeed where others failed. Dr. Kapoor's body slowly descended until his feet touched the roof again. The glow in his eyes began to fade. "We depart now," the architect said, its voice growing fainter. "For the first time in eons, this burden passes to another. Do not disappoint us, humans of Mars." With those final words, the light faded completely from Kapoor's eyes, and he collapsed. Dr. Patel rushed to check his vital signs while Alex held the sphere carefully, feeling its power thrum against his palms. Above them, the light forms began to ascend, moving back toward the upper atmosphere. The massive spire stopped pulsing and settled into a steady, more subdued glow. In the distance, several voidborn ships that had tried to flee suddenly lost cohesion, their twisted forms dissolving into nothingness. Apparently, the architects weren't allowing escape. Admiral Catri's voice came through the comm again. "Commander, whatever you did seems to be working. The remaining voidborn ships are either surrendering or being eliminated. Ground teams report the same with the warriors." Alex stared at the glowing sphere in his hands, hardly believing what had just transpired. "Sir, request immediate secure transport for a high-value asset to Phobos Station. And we're going to need to establish a special division, something to manage this new responsibility." "Understood, Commander. I believe you've just earned yourself a promotion and a new command." Dr. Kapoor regained consciousness with a gasp. His eyes were normal again, but filled with wonder as he looked at Alex and the sphere. "I can see it all," he whispered. "The engine systems, its functions, it's incredible. The architects built something beyond anything we could have imagined. And now it's ours." As the Fifth Fleet's dropships began descending through the atmosphere to secure the area, Alex gazed out over the Martian landscape. The dust storms were clearing, revealing a horizon dotted with human colonies, lights shining defiantly against the gathering darkness. "Not just ours," Alex said, carefully handing the sphere to Dr. Patel for temporary safekeeping. "Our responsibility." In the weeks that followed, the newly formed Martian Containment Authority began establishing control over the ancestor engine systems. The surrendered Voidborn were returned to their prison deep beneath the Martian surface, and humanity's hold on the Red Planet was secured, not just by right of settlement, but by cosmic appointment. Dr. Patel and her team discovered that the engine did more than just contain the Voidborn. It could be tuned to accelerate Mars' terraforming, making the planet more habitable while maintaining the prison's integrity. It was a delicate balance, but one that promised a future beyond what any human settler had dreamed possible. 6 months after the battle at Newton Research Base, Alex stood at the observation window of the new Martian Defense Headquarters, built adjacent to the towering spire that now served as both warning and promise. The former commander, now General Chen, watched as teams of scientists, TS and engineers worked to integrate human technology with the ancient systems of the architects. Dr. Kapoor approached, looking more rested than he had in months. The neural connection had changed him, giving him insights that proved invaluable to their work, though sometimes the knowledge seemed to weigh heavily on him. "The latest tests are complete," he reported. "We've successfully activated the atmospheric processors. Within 5 years, sectors 3 through 7 should be breathable without suits." "Good," Alex nodded. "And the containment protocols?" "Holding at 100%. The Voidborn are secure." Alex was about to respond when an alert chimed from the command center. One of the operators called out, "General, we're detecting an anomalous reading from the engine's deep sensors. Something's coming through the outer system, fast." Alex and Kapoor rushed to the monitoring station. The readings showed an object moving toward Mars at impossible speeds, somehow evading all conventional detection until it was nearly upon them. "Is it the architects returning?" Alex asked tensely. Kapoor studied the data, his expression growing troubled. "No, the energy signature is different. And it's not Voidborn either." The object slowed as it approached Mars' orbit, finally becoming visible to their enhanced telescopes. It wasn't a ship, at least not like anything they'd seen before. It appeared to be a perfect black cube, featureless and utterly alien. "General," Kapoor said quietly, There's something you should know. When I was connected to the architect's consciousness, I glimpsed other things. Other prisoners. The Voidborn weren't the only species they contained. Alex felt a chill run down his spine as the implications sank in. You're saying there are more prisons out there? More alien species being held? Kapoor nodded slowly. And I think, he pointed to the cube now settling into orbit around Mars, I think someone just noticed that the wardens changed. On the main screen, the cube began to transform, unfolding into something new and unknown. Humanity had claimed Mars and defeated one alien threat, but their role as cosmic prison wardens was just beginning. The real test was about to arrive. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as the black cube continued its transformation in Mars orbit. Klaxons sounded while technicians rushed to battle stations, the memory of the Voidborn invasion still fresh in everyone's minds. Defensive protocols active, reported Lieutenant Macy, now Alex's second-in-command. Fifth Fleet vessels moving to intercept. Alex raised a hand. Hold fire. Let's not make the same mistake twice. If they wanted to attack, they would have done so already. The cube had fully unfolded into what resembled a crystalline snowflake, its facets reflecting the distant sunlight in prismatic patterns. It maintained its position, making no aggressive moves. We're receiving a transmission, one of the communications officers announced. It's unlike anything in our protocols. Dr. Kapoor stepped forward. Route it through the engine's translation matrix. The architects left us that capability for a reason. Moments later, a voice filled the command center, neither male nor female, neither mechanical nor organic, but somewhere in between. Custodians of Sol 4, it said, using the astronomical designation for Mars. We bring greetings from the Coalition of Free Worlds. We have observed the transfer of wardenship and wish to establish diplomatic relations. Alex and Kapoor exchanged shocked glances. Coalition of Free Worlds? Alex asked. You're not another prisoner? No, the voice replied. We are those who escaped imprisonment. Those who fought back against the Architect's control, just as you fought against the Voidborn. We have monitored this system for millennia, waiting for the Architects to abandon their post. Dr. Patel, who had joined them in the command center, looked skeptical. If you've been watching us for so long, why only approach now? Because only now has a species proven worthy of the responsibility. The Architects did not simply give you control of the prison, they tested you first. Your victory was earned, not granted. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just impressed the Architects, they'd also been observed by this mysterious coalition. What do you want from us? Alex asked directly. An alliance, the voice replied. The Voidborn are but one of many dangerous species the Architects imprisoned across the galaxy. Some deserved their fate, others were contained simply for refusing to submit to Architect dominance. We believe custodians who have fought for their freedom will judge more fairly than the Architects ever did. Over the next several days, representatives from the coalition transferred to the Martian surface while their vessel remained in orbit. They weren't humanoid, their bodies were composed of crystalline structures housing swirling energy patterns, but they communicated clearly and seemed genuinely interested in cooperation. 3 weeks after first contact, Alex stood with Dr. Patel in the newly constructed diplomatic chamber. Through the transparent dome overhead, Earth shone like a blue jewel against the black velvet of space. Did you ever imagine, Dr. Patel asked, watching coalition representatives interact with human diplomats, that digging up a strange crystal would lead to all this? Alex smiled. I was just hoping to make it back to Phobos Station alive. Now look at us, cosmic prison wardens and the newest members of an interstellar coalition. The Martian Containment Authority has been renamed, Dr. Patel noted. Earth Defense Council finally approved Solar System Diplomatic and Security Administration. Quite a mouthful. Politicians love their acronyms, Alex chuckled. But the important thing is they've recognized that we're not just defending Mars anymore, we're representing all of humanity in something much bigger. Across the chamber, Dr. Kapoor was deep in discussion with the coalition's chief diplomat, holographic displays showing various prison systems throughout the galaxy. The neural connection had made him their most valuable translator, able to understand concepts that would have been incomprehensible before. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Dr. Patel said, turning to face Alex. "The Coalition maintains that some species were imprisoned unjustly. What if the Voidborn are among them?" Alex had considered this question many times since the Coalition's arrival. "That's why we're establishing the review protocols. Every prisoner will have their case evaluated based on evidence, not just the Architect's judgment. If the Voidborn were wrongfully imprisoned, we'll need to determine if they can be safely released and where they could go." Playing cosmic judge and jury, Dr. Patel mused. "Not exactly what we signed up for when we came to Mars." "No," Alex agreed. "But maybe it's what we were meant for all along." Outside the diplomatic chamber, construction teams were expanding the Martian colony at an unprecedented rate. With Coalition technology accelerating the terraforming process and the engine's energy powering their efforts, what had once been a harsh frontier was rapidly becoming a thriving world. Gardens bloomed in pressurized domes, children born on Mars played in specialized recreation centers, and universities established orbital campuses to study the wealth of new knowledge now available to humanity. 6 months after the Coalition's arrival, Alex stood on the observation deck of his quarters, watching the sunset paint the Martian landscape in shades of orange and gold. The spire, now integrated with human and Coalition technology, stood as a monument to both their victory and their responsibility. Jenkins, now a captain, joined him at the railing. "General, the first diplomatic vessel is ready for departure. Coalition representatives say the Centauri system is eager to establish relations with Earth." "Still feels surreal, doesn't it?" Alex said, watching the distant figures of human and Coalition engineers working together at the base of the spire. "A few months ago, we were fighting for survival. Now we're preparing for our first diplomatic mission to another star system." Jenkins smiled. "From what I've heard, the Centaurians were fighting their own battle against another group of escaped prisoners. They'll have a lot in common with us." As the Martian night fell and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Alex thought about how close they had come to losing everything, and how their determination to fight for their home had ultimately opened the door to something far greater than they could have imagined. Mars had been saved, yes. But in saving it, humanity had found its place among the stars. Not as conquerors, not as the conquered, but as protectors and judges, using their hard-won wisdom to navigate the complex cosmos they had only just begun to understand. The war for Mars was over. Humanity's journey was just beginning.